Welcome to section 10.2 of genetics. In this section, we will be memorizing the details of Edwards syndrome. So let's get started. Our story of Edwards syndrome takes place outside of Old Man Edwards' shop. Edwards' shop for Edwards syndrome. It's actually election day, and Edwards' shop hosts one of the city's voting booths. As you can see on this window, you must be 18 years old to vote, which makes sense. We all know that you need to be 18 years old to vote. Now, the number 18 stands for chromosome 18, which is the problem in this syndrome, because there are 3 copies of it. Therefore, Edwards syndrome is also called trisomy 18. So again, must be 18 to vote for trisomy 18. As you can see, there is a closed sign outside the voting booth. This woman here has missed her opportunity to vote. That's gotta be super frustrating. You can see she is frustrated because she is clenching her fists in anger and disappointment. Her clenched fist anger is totally understandable. How could the polls be closed? It's still sunny outside. In any case, her clenched fists will help you remember the clenched fists that Edwards syndrome infants often have. Now look at those impressive gauges hanging in her ears, pulling them lower on her head. This lowering of her ears represents the low-set ears that Edwards syndrome patients are known to have. So big pulling ear gauges for low-set ears. Now look at her head high in this awesome bun. This bun kind of makes her occiput, this area of her skull, appear more prominent. The jewels don't represent anything themselves. They are simply a nice way to draw attention to her prominent occiput. Anyways, this prominent bejeweled bun represents the prominent occiput seen in Edwards syndrome patients. So prominent bun for prominent occiput. Now let's bring in Old Man Edward himself. He sits outside his shop to ensure no one can vote if they are late. Look at him point that finger of scorn at our young eligible voter. You can almost hear him say, "You're late, you whippersnapper." Anyways, look at that rocking chair he sits on. The rocking chair represents the rocker bottom feet seen in patients with trisomy 18. So rocking chair for rocker bottom feet. Now he has a trusty little dog chewing on an animal jawbone that he himself is much too small for. This jaw that is being gnawed on by the small dog represents micrognathia in these patients, or small jaw. So micro dog gnawing on a jaw stands for micrognathia. Now look at this kid on the sidewalk back here. He is trying to fix his broken car. At Physio, we like to use cars to help draw attention to cardiac issues. So a broken car represents cardiac disease. The fact that a child is here working on this broken car further emphasizes the fact that the cardiac disease is congenital. So again, a child working on broken car for congenital cardiac disease in Edwards syndrome. Now, little man back here is trying to impress the girl next door by offering her a sweet ride in his car. And I mean sweet. Look at those sweet cookies he gave her. Unfortunately, the cookies are stuck together, conjoined if you will. This represents the non-disjunction and meiosis that leads to trisomy 18. So conjoined cookies for non-disjunction. The maternal labs are often super hard to remember. So let's go over them right now. Look at the delivery truck in the background. It's driven by a pretty careless delivery driver. He forgot to close the back door, so a brand new HD TV fell out of the back. HD TV sounds a lot like beta HCG. The fact that it landed on the ground indicates that beta HCG is low. So HD TV landing on the ground for low beta HCG. As if a destroyed HD TV wasn't bad enough, the TV wrecked a nearby street sign on its way down to the ground. That poor delivery driver is racking up some costly mistakes. Anyways, the fallen sign reads E Street. E Street kind of sounds like estrogen. The fact that it has fallen will help you remember that estrogen is low. So fallen E Street sign stands for low estrogen. Now look at the tree in the background here. Notice how someone has carved their first initial into the tree. From the carved M, there is sap dripping to the ground. That poor tree is losing all that sap. Anyways, this M sap represents MSAFP, or rather, maternal serum alpha-fetoprotein. You will sometimes hear or simply read AFP, but often you will come across MS-AFP for maternal serum AFP. But looking at the letters and sounding it out, it sounds a lot like MSAP. The fact that MSAP is dripping down to the ground will help you remember that MSAP is low in Edwards syndrome. So MSAP on the ground for low maternal serum alpha-fetoprotein, or MSAP. Another lab you will be tested on in trisomies is inhibin A. We didn't include anything in Edwards syndrome because inhibin A is normal. So when you think of Edwards syndrome from this image, you won't remember anything about inhibin A, and that's because it's normal. And with that, you have learned all the items that you need to memorize for Edwards syndrome.